In this video, I want to talk a bit about domestication, but not about animals and plants that we have domesticated, because humans are not the only domesticators. Other domestication systems are, for example, these damselfish that domesticated mysid shrimp and feed on algal patches that they defend, or ambrosia beetles that domesticated a fungus which they use to line the insides of their nests that they chew in the trees. And a particularly good example are leaf-cutting ants, which cultivate different species of fungus, that is the white stuff you see here, and they feed them with the leaves that they cut from the trees surrounding them, and these fungus serve as pretty much their only food source. But now I want to focus on another group of ants that evolved a mutualism with aphids that can often also be classified as domestication. So aphids suck the plant sap from the phloem of plants, and this sap has a high sugar concentration, but is relatively low in amino acids, which are of course the building blocks of proteins. But in general, plant sap is very thin, so in order to reach their minimum intake of specific amino acids that they need to build important proteins, aphids have to filter a lot of plant sap and then excrete such drops that you see here with the excess sugars and other amino acids. And these excretions, or also the P, is called honeydew. Then come along some ants, which, among other insects, often lick the sugar of the leaf surfaces, but some ant species evolved a mutualism with the aphids, where the ants tend or herd them. So they drink the honeydew and protect the aphids from predators, like lady beetles and parasites like these wasps, so that no one eats away their precious food producers. But additionally, when the productivity of the aphids drop, the ants also carry their livestock to another plant or plant part that might have a higher sap pressure or higher quality sap. On the other hand, the aphids' behavior has also adapted to the ants. So the aphids excrete more drops when they are rapidly touched by the ants' antennae, like you can see here, than when they are left alone. And by the way, this also helps the aphids to not drown in their own excretions. So the paper I want to summarize here investigates a really interesting observation, and that is that those aphid species that have not evolved a mutualism with ants, they excrete a lower quality honeydew than those that are living in a mutualism with ants. That means that aphids can probably change the common low quality sugars and amino acids that they get from the plants into valuable and rare sugars and essential amino acids. And those not living with ants, they keep more of the valuable products for themselves. The title of the paper is Flexibility in the Composition and Concentration of Amino Acids in Honeydew of the Japonicid aphid Tuberculatus quercicola. I chose this paper and the general topic because it is a great example showing that such a complex behavior can arise in such simple individuals just through the mechanism of evolution without any higher planning capabilities or reasoning in any party. So the research question of this article is, to what can we attribute the difference in honeydew quality that we see between the tended aphids and the non-tended aphids? And the first hypothesis of that is it's only the genes. So that means that different species have evolved different honeydew. And the alternative to that is that it's the environment. So that means being visited by the ants or not is what changes within one aphid what honeydew it produces. The authors looked at those two species, which occur on such oak trees in Japan. They randomly divided the aphid colonies on their focal tree into two treatments. Half of the colonies were freely accessible by the ants, and the other half were blocked off by these little nets around the leaves. They then observed the honeydew dropping behavior and took samples of the honeydew to analyze it in the lab and know how much of it they excrete. After 24 hours, the researchers then switched the treatments around and repeated the measurements so that each aphid group was once in each treatment. This was done 3 times in June, July, and August to also check for a seasonal effect. The results are that the amino acid amount is higher in ant-tended aphid honeydew, and in it there are also more different amino acids. So the excretion behavior is that when ants tended the aphids, the latter produced more drops that were also smaller, so that led to the same total amount of honeydew over time. So that clearly answers the question. It's the environment, so the presence or the absence of the ants, that changes the behavior of the aphids and the composition of the honeydew. A particularly interesting question for further research is that aphids, which are tended by ants, they reproduce less. So there is apparently a cost to them being herded by ants. And also ants choose the aphids with the best honeydew. So apparently, for these aphids, the benefits of being tended and defended by ants outweigh the costs of having to excrete better honeydew in order to attract these ants, and that is somehow also advantageous to not reproduce as much. So the big question is then, how do different evolutionary and ecological factors change this trade-off? So when is it really adaptive to do this? Specifically, some of these factors could be things like predation and parasitism of the aphids, or the competition within and between species of aphids and between the species of ants, and the plant quality, and of course a lot more. So I hope that next time you see some ants and aphids on a plant, you take a second look and appreciate them just a tiny bit more.